The Ainili, the Uratian people who populated the Van province of modern-day Turkey in the Bronze to Iron Age, honored the Tinjir. But what were they? Were they the members of a neighboring culture, the vestiges of a previous civilization, or emissaries of an ET intelligence? G'day and welcome to the Paul Wallis channel. We're in the middle of the ancient megalithic tour of the Van province in Turkey, which I'm co-leading with my friend Matt LaCroix. And I wanted to share with you this talk that I gave to the group as we traveled to the sites of Ayanas and capi. Please forgive the weird camera angle and the dodgy lighting, but I wanted to share with you my thoughts while I'm here in Turkey on these very special sites of capi, the light gate or bright doorway, and ayanas, which seems to be the sacred heart of the practice and beliefs and cultural memory of the Bronze to Iron Age Ainili, the Uratian people. I'll see you in the comments, and I want to tease out this question of what were the Tinjir. Scholars often refer to them as the gods of the Uratians, but is that what they really were? I absolutely loved today at Ayanas. How was it for you?
Excellent.
Yeah. I know today was the day that Matt and I were particularly looking forward to. It's a site very close to both our hearts, and to share it with you was something very special. And to see the reverence with which this group visited that site and sought to understand it, I really think it's something for the local archaeologists to behold. And as we said before, I think it is increasing appreciation of what is at Ayanas and the other sites all around. And we are part of an international conversation about these sites and what they are. Now, today at Ayanas, we did not have Mehmet Kushman with us, the last Uratian, which means you may have struggled to decipher the Uratian cuneiform inscription on the stone. Then I'll need your help, Faiz, later on. And so for the moment, it must have remained a mystery as to what exactly it was written on those most important blocks as we entered into the sanctuary at Ayanas. So before Faiz comes up and gives us the full version of that text, I'll just tell you the snippets I know. And please don't correct me, Faiz, but you'll have your moment later. It is very similar in essence to the inscription that we saw at Chavuz Tepe, in which King Sarduri II is, shall we say, honoring himself and the Tinjir at the same time. By the power of the great Tinjir Haldi, I, Sarduri, have created this great citadel. I dedicate it to the great Tinjir Irmushini, who gave us the gift of agriculture. And I transformed this land from barren land into fertile farms. And this is the way it goes as the Uratian kings wrap themselves up in the story of the Tinjir, like we're all mates, just as we saw at Hagia Sophia, where the emperor was mates with Jesus, and the emperor and his wife were mates with Jesus' mum. It's the same thing, so that we see them in the same light. It's by the authority of the Tinjir that the Uratians are reigning, so on and so forth. So he's doing that. He's honoring himself by honoring the Tinjir, and the same thing happens at Ayanas. But what does King Rusa II honor himself and the Tinjir for? Again, he says, it's by the power of the great Tinjir Haldi that I have created this citadel, turned barren land into fertile farms, and created a gateway for Haldi. What is one of those? Is it or is it not one of these? And I'll start off at the end that it may be, and then we'll consider the it may not be. So the name of this place is Meher Capi. And you'll all be familiar with half of that name because it was very important to our arrival in Istanbul. We all met at Capi 14. Capi is a door, a gateway, a doorway. Meher Capi is a light gate or a bright doorway. Now this is about 5 meters tall, and we see the familiar triple inset, and it's a ratio that is commonly used in Greco-Roman architecture. So it sort of looks familiar when we see it.
We're talking about the golden ratio, 1 to 1.618, on the perimeter of the doorway.
This was created, however, if we date it by the inscription, 3 generations before the foundation of Rome. But we're finding people using very familiar architectural forms. And it's a reminder that architectural science, sacred geometry, is a very, very long story that goes way, way back into history, was already being invoked when installations like this were being created. And when we went to Ayanas today, we will have experienced other architectural forms that we might be familiar with. So just as at Chavez Tepe, at Ayanas, we have a narthex, a great square where you can fit a lot of people. And you can enter that square, and then there is a narrowing and a raising as fewer people are going to go into the sacred space, the sanctuary space. Things will have to happen before you move from the big space into the small space, but that is like a template for any temple. It's like a template for any church. And with my background in Christian ministry, my understanding of the theology of sacred spaces, I recognize it as if it's a template for Christian churches you can find all around the world. So they've got that going. They've got the west to east orientation going. Now, I was given a Christian explanation for why all churches are oriented that way, but if we've been doing it since the Iron Age and before, might there be other reasons going much, much further back? Something else that was used at Ayanas that you might have sensed is that they designed a conduit to run under the dense magnetic rock that we were standing on in the narthex. Why would they do that? Because it creates an E-field intended to heighten your state of consciousness, to make you feel suddenly pepped up, more awake, more alert, healthier, more powerful. An accident, a coincidence? Well, not when you realize that this is a form used all around the world in all kinds of sacred architecture. You can find it in Cambodia. You can find it in temples in India. You'll find that Trappist Cistercian monasteries in the Benedictine tradition have used it as well, so that their cloisters are built on dense magnetic rock with water flowing over it, so that the monks in those cloisters have this heightened state of consciousness. They feel healthy, they feel well, they feel alert, better able to connect with higher wisdom. These are not the only elements of human architectural science used by the ancients who created the installations that we're visiting, but I'm going to say more about that later. So what is the bright doorway? What is the Meher Capi? The story around the bright doorway is that it was through this bright doorway, or one of the others that were created, that Haldi would return. Now, just note this. Haldi was not there in the Uratian period. The story around Haldi was that he'd been there in the past among their ancestors or predecessors in the region, but they hoped he would come back. And that is why King Rusa II, in the 8th century BCE, one of his boasts is he's created a doorway for Haldi to return, because we all want that, don't we? He's saying, yes, we all want Haldi to come back. Why? We'll see in a moment. How? Well, apparently he will return in a beam of light, surrounded by all the other Tinjir. He will come through a bright doorway back for another golden age, such as we hear from our ancestors. It was a golden age that established us, so they believed, as a civilization. The Tinjir came and shared technology with us, specifically the gift of agriculture. And here we have 47 of those mysterious individuals named: Haldi, Arbani, Teshaba, Shivini, Ichwini. 47, and that's not the full list. These are just the ones honored here. So just think about that for a moment. The story is that we give honor for the great achievement of the agricultural leap forward, the deep story of the region, not to our kings, not to our elders, not to our ancestors, but to mysterious, non-human beings called Tinjir. This is an odd story. What is the Zitzim Laban of that story? What is its purpose if it's not shoring up the authority of your kings and your kingdom and giving all the credit to beings whom you don't even define and don't live with you anymore, and you just hope maybe one day they'll be hearing? What's the purpose of that story? And how is it that that is the story that repeats all around the planet? So many ancestral stories and indigenous stories, when they talk about how we appeared as a civilization, give the credit for that to strange, non-human others. So another example of that would be the Babylonian story of the emergence of ancient Sumer. They had their explanation for how the Sumerian civilization appeared from out of nowhere, and it was written down by the Greek Babylonian priest Berossus in the 3rd century BCE. And instead of giving credit to the ancestors of the Sumerians gave credit to terrifying monsters. That's how they were described. Terrifying monsters whom they first encountered on the banks of the Red Sea, who terrified and repelled them, and who could operate on land, but they had a base under the water. And so you can, almost in the story, you can hear the first impression of, we don't know what we're looking at. What are these things? Are they dangerous? And bit by bit, they worked out they were not dangerous. And they developed a relationship with them, and the Apkallu taught the ancestors of the Sumerians agricultural science, how to canalize the environment to make the land fertile, civil engineering so that they could build cities, maths, writing, legal systems, record keeping, everything you're going to need to run a city and have a much denser population. All the accoutrements of civilization, says Berossus, were given us by these other kinds of beings, these mysterious, terrifying beings. In the Bible, there's a similar story. The ancestors of the Hebrews gave credit to a being called Asherah, who taught their ancestors how to farm, how to become a civilization. Zulu people carry a story of Mbaba Mwana Warisa, who taught their ancestors how to farm and how to make beer. And so they give thanks to her for that. It's a wonderful gift. In Australia, at the top end, in the Northern Territory, if you meet the Yolngu people, Their elders will tell you that there was a time when their ancestors didn't know how to live in balance with the environment. Now, Aboriginal Australians are renowned for their profound ability to live in balance with the ecosystem in which they find themselves. But the Yolngu story says there was a time when our ancestors didn't know how to do this. They didn't know what to hunt or how to hunt, what to fish or how to fish, what plants were good for food, what should be avoided, what were good for higher consciousness, what were good for medicines. We were taught, they said, by mysterious non-human others who were physically very different to us, and we couldn't get our heads around it. They were so tall and thin, and then they seemed to be able to come and go on the wind in a way we couldn't understand. That's the Australian story. Some of you will be familiar with the Dogon story from Mali, West Africa. And their tutors look very similar in their art to the mystifying monsters the Babylonians talked about, except the Dogon go further and say, our helpers came from a planet orbiting a star in the Sirius star system. And Cherokee's story gets specific too, about where their ancient helpers came from, a planet orbiting a star somewhere in the Pleiades. All give credit to mysterious non-human others for the most important leap forward in the human story, the leap forward into agriculture. It's the same thing in all the inscriptions. When the Bianili kings talk about the deep story of this region, they evoke that story of external help. And when we get to the carved symbols, we can add another degree to that detail. External help at a time when our survival depended on it. External help at a time when our harvests were failing year after year. External help when we couldn't get our crops to fruit and flower and feed us, which tells you there had been an ecological catastrophe. And that's the deep story of this region that is told not only by the locals, but by others pointing here. The Babylonians pointing here and saying humanity was rebooted here when Yusudra landed here. The Hebrews who said that humanity was rebooted here when Noah landed here and planted the first vineyard. This is the story of the Tinjir. But when Kings Manua and Ishpuini dedicated this installation here in the 9th century BCE, that's the 820s and 810s, the Tinjir did not live among them. They were a story. They were maybe a memory, but the Tinjir were not there. They were still to be honored, though. And so here we see this cultural memory beginning to evolve into what begins to look like a religion, because the inscription here goes into great detail as to how we must honor the Tinjir. We remember them with thanksgiving and with love. How? The inscription tells us how. With bulls and rams.
Wow.
47 Tinjir are named, and the number of bulls and rams for each one according to the importance of their contribution to the human story, all in massive volumes. Why? Why would Tinjir, especially since they didn't live here anymore, need bulls and rams? Well, I'm going to suggest 4 possible reasons. And the first possible reason is it's a trick. It's a sly tax. This is really food for the kings and priests. We'll gather all the best of the rams and bulls. We'll tell the people it's for the Tinjir. They won't know, they won't suspect. We're eating it all. Except that the volumes are enormous. There's a parallel story to this in the Apocrypha. There's an addendum to the book of Daniel in which the Hebrew writer says the Babylonians did exactly that. They claimed to have an Elohim, an advanced being, living in a tent. They claimed that the dragon was in the dark bit at the back in the smoke, and they got all these rams and bulls and gold and virgin girls saying, it's for the Elohim in the tent. You can't go in, but he's there right at the, you can't see him, he's in the deep, just leave all those here. We'll make sure they get to him. And the joke in Bel and the Dragon, this gets exposed because Daniel has in fact killed the Elohim in the tent. And it's the priests who are eating all that food and enjoying the benefits of that gold and the benefits of the virgin girls who've all been delivered to them. So it's all a manipulation, says the Hebrew writer. That's what the Babylonians did. Could it be the same here? Were the people being tricked? Second possible reason is that it's not the priests who are eating all this stuff. It's far too much food for them. Maybe it's the people. Maybe we're looking at harvest festivals, not just at the harvest time, but at all 4 cardinal points of the year, the equinoxes and solstices. Maybe these are given as a thank offering to the Tinjir, and then the people eat it, and it's a great festival. Now, that is possible, but it is still a lot of food, and I'm not sure if it really adds up. Another possibility is that there's some kind of a memory here, or at least a story, that this is how we supported the Tinjir in the past. This is what they like to eat. And so we gather these foods because this is how we support our Tinjir, and they support us by teaching us, by being our tutors, by improving the human condition. That is possible, and it's an echo of something from the past. It could be something else. It could be that the Tinjir of the Uratian people were like the Elohim of the Bible. That's Yahweh and the other Elohim like Dagon, Milcom, Chemosh. And they don't eat lamb, they don't eat beef. They inhale the smoke of the burned animals. If you have an Elohim, if you have a Yahweh or an Elohim living with you, you want to keep him happy, you want to keep him calm, you want to pacify him, you do it by burning rams or bulls. They love that smell. That's the biblical story. Could something like that be happening here? I don't think it's the last one, because the Tinjir were not dragons, they were not monsters. There's not the hint that these were beings to be feared and tiptoed around. It's just not part of the story at all. Remember, the Uratians really wanted them to come back, and that's why they've created a gateway. But before we leave Meher Capi, I want to ask, why a bright doorway? Why a light gate? The story, as I say, is that Haldi and the 47 others and the others besides will return in a beam of light. They went away in a beam of light, and they will return in a beam of light. When I first heard this story, my fertile imagination said, I've seen this on Star Trek. That's how you teleport, isn't it? You break your body down into photons and you beam that light to a new location and then reassemble in the other place. This must be the story of a portal. Maybe they're trying to create a portal so that the Tinjir can come back in a beam of light. Well, it's possible. It's possible, and it's not the only place that talks about mysterious beings coming and going in that way. You can go to Scotland. Read the work of Reverend Robert Kirk, writing in the 1600s. A wonderful guy, an Episcopalian priest, very focused on Bible translations. He was a great guy because he also listened intently to indigenous story. Of course, I admire his work, and I admire his courage, because 1600s was a time when if you started putting forward stuff that wasn't orthodoxy, the consequences could be appalling. And I don't mean a few nasty emails. Reverend Robert Kirk talked about beings, mysterious beings, who could arrive on a beam of light and disappear on a beam of light. And his collective word for those beings was the Sith. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
That's Star Wars, isn't it? Back in his day, it wasn't pronounced Sith. It was spelt Sith, but pronounced Shay. But that was the story. And I just think it's strange that these stories repeat in cultures so diverse, beings coming and going on beams of light. But there's another possibility, and it's actually the one I favor. And it's one that I get from comparing the stories here with another part of the world. You remember I mentioned the other day Snorri Sturluson. He was the post-Viking chieftain through whom we know the Norse stories about the Aesir, people like Thor and Odin. He was writing in the 1200s, and he was a political leader, but he was also a poet and a writer of prose. And his intent was to crystallize and safeguard Norse culture and Norse cultural memory at a time when it was being completely swamped by medieval Christianity. And so he retained the stories and the ways of telling story. And one of the stories he told was of King Svedgir, who one day was on his land with some of his men and found in one of his fields something that had never been there before. A giant pebble, the size of a house, with a door in it. And the door opened, and out of that doorway stepped a little man, about the size of a year 6. And King Svedgir stepped forward and greeted the little man, and then walked with him into the pebble, and the door closed, and King Svedgir was never seen again. That's the story. And when I heard that, I thought, could this inform how we understand what a bright doorway was to the ancestors of the Uratians? Because picture that scene. This is an era before artificial lighting. That pebble opens and a bright light shines out of it that amazes people. And whenever these strange other beings come and go, it's always in and out of one of those bright doorways, isn't it? And I just wonder if there's a connection. There's a language connection between these two parts of the world. There's a symbological connection. There's a DNA connection. We can trace the migration. Is it possible that the stories have migrated as well and can inform each other? Now, those of you who know me know that I take a lot of flack for considering the possibility that our ancestors may have had contact with actual non-human others, with other intelligences, with other civilizations from other parts of our cosmos. And so I begin every day with correspondence. And some of my correspondence is like this room. It's just wonderful fellowship. It's people sharing their journeys. And some of it is different. Actually, my last 12 days, I'm going to say this is a bit of a plug for what I'm doing next, were different to that. Because my last 12 days, I got up and I deliberately did not look at my inbox because I didn't want to pollute my energy. I woke up, I had my glass of water, I went straight into the studio, recorded for an hour, spent the rest of the day editing, exporting, uploading, 12 days back to back, and then I was here. And I did that because I'm putting together an online learning community. It's called ancientknowledgeacademy.com. And if you go there, what you will see is a number of courses that I'm providing at ancientknowledgeacademy.com. Courses to do with how to learn to read the Bible in different ways. Courses to do with how to read the stories in the cuneiforms if you can't read cuneiform and you don't speak Uratian and you don't speak Sumerian. How are you going to get into it? Courses like that. And though it's packaged as courses, the real purpose of it is to create little pools of community among people who are interested in human origins, human potential, and our place in the cosmos. Because you can't build community in YouTube comments. And I applaud many of the people I see regularly in the comments who are willing to be courageous and put forward a thought or an experience, knowing they're going to have all kinds of people trolling on them for whatever reason. But Ancient Knowledge Academy is a place to attract like-minded people like this so that we can have face time together and go on a learning journey together. So that's how I've been investing my time. But when I'm not writing and recording, I seem to spend a good chunk of my life defending my existence to people who think that if I think our ancestors might have thought the Tinjir were real, then I deserve to be killed. Oh. Or at least insulted. And thankfully, most of the time, they only think I need insulting. And it's the experts in that who will email me. Although, we moved house last year. We now have a fence. We now have a security gate. We now have security cameras because some of these threats are really quite serious. That's the world I stepped out of in June when I came to film with Matt for The Missing Key. I had just published this book, The Eden Enigma. It's all about this region and the deep stories of this region looked at through the symbols, the carvings that have been left behind. And the provocative subtitle is, do ancient carvings in the mountains of Turkey carry memories of ET contact from the dawn of civilization? Then I was here in the company of very eminent academic archaeologists who've made it their lives to understand the history of the cultures here and these ancient sites. So when I was here with Matt filming, I was just a little bit sort of furtive, a little bit circumspect, feeling a bit sheepish, trying to work out how these people were looking at me. Because I didn't want to be the one to bring any disrepute to Matt's movie. And I was just wondering, I'm Australian, I'm not Turkish. I'm not an archaeologist. I don't have a PhD. I have an honors bachelor's degree in theology. Who am I to go trampling all over these people's work, is what I thought they might be thinking. So I was just looking for clues if they were really thinking this or if they were thinking nicer things. And I really was not sure. And then we went out to dinner one evening. We went out for dinner and this professor started plying me with questions. How long did I think the Biainili were in this region? Where did they come from? And what did I think happened to them? Who was Haldi? Was he here before they got here? Was he honored by other peoples other than the Uratians? Did I think he was the same as Haik? Was he the same as Odin? Were there any clues in actual scientific analysis to support any of our thoughts about these ancient peoples, or is it just narrative, and on the questions went? And I thought, oh my goodness, he's trying to work out if I know anything at all about this region. And I hoped I was doing all right with my questions. I heaved a sigh of relief when dinner was over, and I started making my way towards the hotel. But Saba's son, who you may meet tomorrow, Arda, grabbed me by the arm and he said, oh no, don't go back to the hotel. The professor wants to talk to you. He wants to continue the conversation. Oh, okay, great, fine. So I sat down with the Turkish and Kurdish people there, and the questions continued. Well, we made it back to the hotel, and then before we went up, the professor grabbed my arm, and he said, Paul, I like your ideas. And I thought, oh, okay, perhaps I'm doing all right. Well, in the morning, we went to another installation, and he was there. And at one point, he went out of the building for a smoko. And I went out to join him, and the question started up again. And I thought, I have not yet passed. After a few questions, he stopped and he said, Paul, I like how you think. I need to learn to think more like you do. Wow. I love how you gather your data. I love how you build your argument. I need to learn from that. I've read 2 of your books, and you have changed my thinking. Wow. Yeah. I can't speak about it now, but in 2 years' time. My jaw dropped. I could not believe what I was hearing. After months on end of being told I didn't deserve to live because of the worthlessness of my work, here's a real professor. A Turkish professor, an archaeologist, affirming me. And so what I wanted to say was, I am so honored that you would say that to me, because you are the expert. I'm just a writer. But I could only make little squeaky noises because I was in tears. And thankfully, Saba's son Arda was there, and he was able to translate the squeaks into fluent Turkish. But it was a really special moment, and it showed me that things are moving forward here. I fully appreciate, just on the basis of my own inbox, why people might not want to be first in line with a new story. I understand fully why people might be very thoughtful about what the best timing is to reveal new work, to pursue new data, apply new logic to it, and follow where the data leads, and so move the conversation forward. And it just gave me a little glimpse behind the doors here to understand that we may see one thing on the surface, but there are other things happening behind closed doors. I felt privileged to know the story is moving forward, and in 2 years' time, the conversation here is going to be different because of the work of that person. So it was a special moment for me. Now, those of you who know my work know that I actually believe there is paleocontact in the deep story of humanity, but I find that sometimes in conversation, it's better to leave the key language untranslated. And so when I talk about the Tinjir, I talk about the Tinjir. I don't start calling them ETs or aliens, because I think if we just listen to the stories of the Tinjir and what they did when they were here, what they were capable of, I think those stories speak for themselves. And we piece them together from the cuneiform inscriptions and from the symbols left behind. Now, we are still learning the Uratian language. And so the real academics are puzzling over the Uratian in that inscription at Ayanas. And there's an ambiguity in it, because Rusa II says, by the power of the great Haldi, I created this citadel and a doorway for Haldi. Does that mean he created this citadel and one of these? Possibly, but there's an ambiguity in the and. It is possible that Rusa is saying, I created this citadel at Ayanas as a gateway for Haldi.
The town in which Ayanas finds itself is called Agati, a word which means gateway. Does this provide us a clue as to the ancient meaning of the site of Ayanas at its heart? Could it indicate that Ayanas itself is the gateway referred to in King Rusa's inscription?
That might inform how we look at that sanctuary and how it performed and what other architectural science was being used in this place. You will have noticed the beautiful alabaster on the floor in the sanctuary, the beautiful alabaster with the designs on it of what we call the altar, although nothing was sacrificed on it. We don't really know what its function was. And on the walls originally, those impressions were filled with inserts with gold leaf on them. With the sun shining from the west into that room, in an era before artificial lighting, the phenomenon of light bouncing around that sanctuary would have been phenomenal. It would have been a phenomenon for the people of that time and for us too, if we were standing in that place, sitting on that altar, lying on that altar. Imagine that you've done the libation offering, and as a priest or a king, you've drunk some of that libation offering. That's a fermented drink. You're going to feel a little different afterwards. Walk through that e-field that's been generated. You're going to feel a little different. Walk into that phenomenon of light. You're going to feel a little different. And I wonder if the people who built that place were trying to create the conditions in which Haldi would return in a beam of light. Or if not that, the conditions for achieving remote communication with Haldi and the others remembered with such affection. I mention again, they really wanted these beings, who and whatever they were, to return. This is very different from the story of a lot of religion that creates a God to be served and slaved for and obeyed, and the only meaning of your life is to serve that deity. That's not the story of the Tinjir. They were higher beings who helped us at a critical time. And that tells a different story about us. It says, we are important enough that these other advanced beings came to us when we were in danger, when we couldn't get our crops to work, when we could have gone extinct after a cataclysm. They arrived to help us recover and learn how to do agriculture all over again and build civilization. Why wouldn't you want helpers like that to return? It's a story that says we're important, we're valued, and there's a totally different sense of self-esteem that flows from that than from the religious stories that says you exist only to obey, and if you don't, it's at your eternal cost. I'm showing an Assyrian carving here because, to give them credit, they have the best carvings. It's so fine, it's so detailed, but it tells the same story that you find in Armenia and Turkey. And this again touches on the deep story of the region, the gift of agriculture. Now here we have an advanced being. Historians sometimes refer to this kind of being as a genie, but as an advanced being, you can tell because he's got wings. And he's got the handbag of the gods and the pine cone. Sometimes it's a bucket, sometimes it's a bowl, sometimes it's a leaf, but it's basically the same thing. And now we've got, looks a bit more human. Wow, he's got his hands in the same pose. This is a story of tutelage. This is how you hand pollinate a plant. This is how you do cross-pollinating. If you've had an ecological catastrophe, let's say 1,200 years of catastrophes, let's say a great and terrible winter that lasts for more than 1,000 years, you won't have any bees to do that. You're going to have to do it yourself, and this is how you do it. And by cross-pollinating, you can create new strains of plants which we brought from other places so they can thrive in this environment. That is the blue touch paper. That is the fuse paper that explodes agriculture into life. And whenever we see these trees of life, they're never thriving in the wild. They're always in a sort of lab-like condition. In some carvings, a multi-story lab-like condition or a greenhouse condition. And they are being hand-pollinated, cross-pollinated, using this equipment here. Now, I don't disagree with what Matt said the other day, that these came to be the symbols of all the assistance that the advanced beings gave us. They became the symbols of all the advantages that the Tinjir gave us as they upgraded what human life looked like on planet Earth. But I believe in the beginning, they meant what they drew. That this is a story of teaching human beings to hand-pollinate, cross-pollinate, create strains that are going to grow here and give you farms to sustain new populations. Now, this advanced being here on the left, low testosterone, high testosterone. What do you think?
High testosterone.
What makes you think that? You said that very confidently, Teresa. What makes you think that?
Well, his stature, his size, look at the muscles on his calf, his stature completely.
Yeah, absolutely. Look at what he's wearing on his head. I mean, if this were a Rorschach test, you might come with some different answers, but he's definitely symbolizing virility. And I think the gift here is not just of the fertility of the land, but the fertility of the people. This is a story of humanity being enhanced, and it begins with this moment of recovery. And of course, the story is being echoed here more locally as we see Haldi and Teshaba with the same offering. Now, I'm going to say this next part just quickly, so I hope you'll catch what I'm saying. At Meher Capi, sorry, are you signaling to me?
No, I'm scratching myself.
You're just scratching yourself.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Faiz. At Meher Capi, 4 cardinal Tinjir get mentioned first. We might expect, since there are instructions about what appear to be harvest festivals, that they relate to 4 cardinal moments in the year, the equinoxes, the solstices. Tomorrow at Van Museum, you're going to see the shield of Anzaf, and it associates the Tinjir with different constellations. Haldi with Aquarius, Teshaba with Leo, Shavini with Taurus, Ichuini with Scorpio. Great, this all makes sense. Yes, the solstices, equinoxes, the constellations. Except there's something wrong with this picture. Because for the dawning sun to rise through Aquarius and Leo and Taurus and Scorpio at the cardinal moments of the year, that's not going to happen in the 9th century BCE. You would have to go back another 3,000 to 4,000 years for that to happen. And so this is a clue that Haldi and the others are a pantheon of Tinjir who belong to this place before the Uratians got here. And the Uratians are honoring them because they regard these as the gods of the land, and we'd better have them on our side. The Uratians had the Assyrians and the Hittites nipping at their heels for this territory. It was so treasured. And so, of course, they're going to ask Haldi for military assistance and remind him and themselves of what a great military leader he is, as well as a giver of water and ascension for humanity. And in that way, the story of Haldi begins to distort and become the god of war that we see in some of their carvings. But Haldi and the Tinjir were here before. They were ancient story when the Uratians got here. But the ancient story was a story of tutelage and help that tells us that human beings are very, very valuable, and that when we are in deep, deep trouble, we have help in high places, very concerned to make sure we don't go extinct and have a better future. And that's why I centered a whole book on this area, because I think it balances a lot of religion that we grow up with, and it balances a lot of fear when in the modern era we think about a populated cosmos. I have people writing to me in my email telling me that every other planet in the universe is populated by demons. And this is the only planet with humans on it. Can you imagine living in that universe? Because the people emailing me with that message, they live in that universe. And so I wrote this book to say, no, there's a far more positive story that is honored all around the world. This place is just one of them, but it's a vital one because it's here that the gift was given.
Why did they leave at that particular time?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the leaving is part of all the stories I know of ancient tutors. They came, they sat with us for a finite time, and then they went home. And so the Cherokees say they went back to the Pleiades, and the Dogon say they went back to Sirius. Over the border in Armenia is an ancient observatory trained on Cygnus, as if they're hoping for people to return from there. I think the picture that I'm putting together from Ancestral Story is that there's a general rule of non-interference. And if that sounds like Star Trek got it from the ancient stories. So I think coming and helping is kind of a blip, it's kind of an aberration. And so these people come, and once they've delivered their syllabus and they think we'll be okay, they go again. And that's the story. But they leave behind this longing, and very often different people groups put together protocols to try and re-establish contact, or they'll carve a doorway like Meher Capi, hoping they'll come back through that.
But 3,000 years before the Urartians, and then how long were they here? And they did indeed interfere in a very positive way. So I'm just trying to understand that. The 3,000 years is a long time.
For us.
Well, for the Urartians.
Yes.
To maintain this fiction.
Yes, and this hope.
Generation.
Yeah, it is. Zeva.
Any clues or hope that there will be artifacts found that show a previous race to the Uratians?
A previous race to the Uratians. Can you clarify what you mean by race?
Well,
Another people group, you mean?
To fill in that 3,000 year gap.
yeah.
Yes, there was a people group called the Hurrians who were in the region, and at the museum tomorrow we will find artifacts of theirs that look like coins but have a flower motif on them, which is really intriguing because it's one of the most prevalent symbols all around the world. I'm interested to know about the Hurrians. They produced coins. Did they build anything while they were here? Were they interested in some of the high sites and the sacred sites that we're seeing? They must have built something, but that, for the time being, remains not the focus of archaeology in the region, and so there's still a lot of mystery around them and what they were up to. But it's not a vacuum prior to the Uratians. Faiz, you're coming now to tell us the full inscription?
Tomorrow. My question was, thank you first of all for that amazing presentation, and my question was, have you learnt anything while you're here, or either with us or in previous visits, that has either enhanced what your opinions and beliefs are, or challenged anything?
Yes. This timeline problem with the inscription at Meher Capi that suggests that Haldi was here, and then the Uratians came, and I don't think maliciously, but they distorted the picture of him. They turned him into a war god because those were their needs. And you certainly want the most powerful entity of the region on your side and not against you. If you can imagine for a moment Haldi as a real person, or a real advanced person, or a real Tinjir, and all of a sudden you've got this people group expecting you to deliver them military victories by slaughtering all their neighbors, And you may or may not be able to do anything about that, and probably you can't do anything about it, but all that expectation is on you. And there are wars and there are battles, and people lose their children and their wives and their husbands, and all that grief is now laid upon you, because how could you let that happen? If Haldi were a real person, Ayanas is certainly a real place. If all that feeling is being focused there, that's a lot of grief and sadness being laid on top of the Haldi story and on top of that place. And so in some of what was shared today and what was shared when we were here in June, what I hear is that that is being lifted. It's being lifted so that we can recover what the original stories were, what the original truth was, what the original experience was. That the original experience was of helpers who really helped us, not of gods who let us down. And I think that's the narrative that's shifting through everything that we're involved with these tours and with the movie.
Can that grief come out through dreams?
Yes, the grief can come out through dreams. We can feel it, and I think if we're sensitive, we are actually part of what helps that process of healing, because we feel the feeling, and then we are able to purge the feeling.
Yeah.
It's like we're part of the healing of a place.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Faiz. That was a great question. Zenobia.
You know, I was just thinking how we keep talking about a physical being coming in times of trouble. And even in our life, we have times of trouble, like sometimes extreme times of trouble. And you see people who have near-death experiences make a complete change. And they say, oh, I woke up to myself. But the information, like, where's that coming from?
Yes.
They take it completely. Why isn't it that it doesn't have to be a physical person?
No, it doesn't have to be a physical person. Yeah.
But I'll send you the information if you're open to receiving it.
Yes, that's right. So that's why I think here, as at other places, you have ancient protocols designed to invoke an altered state of consciousness so that you're more receptive to your guides, to divine wisdom, to your higher self. And I think that was happening here with the light ceremonies, with the E-field, with the libation offerings. That in that era, that's how the help came, not through physical beings. Laurie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so just to get the timeline straight in my head, then after Haldi was here, Uratians, and then it was buried.
Well, how to get a timeline between the beginning of the Uratians and when Haldi was here, we don't have many guideposts on that. It's like we go back to ancient Sumer, and they tell ancient stories that were ancient by their time, and those stories told of experiences that were ancient by the time those stories were created. So it all gets very mysterious, and it's very difficult to put a timeline on when we think these beings were here. The way I do it is similar to the conversations we've already been having, which is simply to ask, when was there an ecological catastrophe that might have meant there were no bees, and start trying to correlate it with things. So again, we're looking at something like the latter cusp of the Younger Dryas, or we may be looking at a story that goes back to the Adams event 42,000 years ago, or the Toba event 70,000 years ago. And in some cases, the cultural memory of all those moments can be rolled together in a single story, and then it's very difficult to get a date. I'm coming to the belief that the symbols that carry this story were here when the Uratians got here. Now, that's just tentative, I can't prove that, but that's my thought. As to physical burial, I don't know, but there's another kind of burial, of course, that happens when you become part of a Christian or a Muslim empire, because all of a sudden all that old knowledge is not only off syllabus but positively unwelcome, and there's a lot of forgetting that happens at that point.
Please describe the Anu. It's difficult to see the details of what he's doing with his hands and what that represents.
Yes, that is how Anu is portrayed. In other parts of the world, it's how Ahura Mazda is portrayed. It is a disc with wings to show that it can fly, and there are other symbological ways of talking about discs that can fly. Go into Armenia, they have another way of doing it, which is simply to set the discs in a blue sky. And then when you go to what I think are the sister narratives in Scandinavia and Iceland, you will find discs that fly in the sky with people in them who were not Anu. So I'll just leave it there because that's a white rabbit well worth following. And at the back, Tony, thank you.
Arriving here, I was struck down with a virus like I've never had in my life before. And I climbed up my calorie today, but only got halfway. I just couldn't keep going. What I'm going to say is that the amount of kindness that's been exhibited to me by people in this group is extraordinary, and I'm so grateful for it. And that is my insight. That is my epiphany from this gathering.
I'm Paul Wallis, the 7 times internationally best-selling author of the Eden series, host of the Paul Wallis channel, and The Fifth Kind. And I'd like to welcome you to Ancient Knowledge Academy, a learning community for people who are exploring questions of human origins, human potential, and our place in the cosmos. We've been told ancient texts about the gods are just myths. Close encounters and anomalous experiences are just fantasy. And ancient wisdom is just irrelevant. But what if the knowledge of our ancestors is not just a reservoir of information about the past, but a roadmap to a better and bigger human experience? Ancient Knowledge Academy is an opportunity for more intentional community, more immersive learning, and a chance to connect with researchers and truth seekers from all around the world. And I will keep our feet on the ground as we explore these stretching topics. And with every subject that we bring to the courses and modules at the Academy, I will always take us to ancestral wisdom and ancient knowledge, not just to understand the past, but to understand ourselves in a truer light and equip ourselves for life in the 21st century. Courses at the Academy will include all new material, audio, video, and written resources, and live face-to-face elements so that we can make this learning journey together and in real time. The people who reach out to me for this kind of coaching have included in recent years academics, seminarians, Defense Force personnel and veterans, pastors, people who've experienced anomalous or close encounter phenomena, people experiencing a spiritual emergence or rapid paradigm shift. Ancient Knowledge Academy is a safe space where we can sound each other out, speculate, explore, knowing that we are in a supportive and encouraging environment. It's an environment where we don't all have to agree about everything in order to be connected and support each other in our learning journey. Our courses will include navigating unexpected shifts and transitions in our lives, reframing faith and recovering from fundamentalism, living with close encounters and unexplained phenomena, learning to read the ancient cuneiforms of Sumer, Babylonia, Arcadia, and Assyria, and reading them alongside the Bible. A virtual tour of Van Province in Turkey, digging into stories told by Bronze Age artifacts that take us into the world of the last ice age, more than 10,000 years ago. 7 workshops in mindfulness and consciousness to heighten your cognitive powers, your intuitive capacity, and your capacity to manage stress. Finding the juicy bits in the works of Plato, and how to find and talk about paleo-contact in the Bible. The courses and modules that we're bringing to the Academy will enable us to share the journey for many years to come. And I look forward to welcoming you to the Academy. Sign up, and I'll look out for you.